Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Voice of Rio. I'm excited to tell you that we've got two of our finest faculty here from the Wildlife and Fish Program, Wildlife Conservation Program here at the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College. And my co-host, who's normally here, Dr. Donna Mitchell, is taking a day off, well-deserved, and so I'm going to be doing this show by myself with my two guests, and I want to introduce them now and have them talk a little bit about the program and what they're doing. First off is Dr. Don Althoff. And Dr. Althoff, if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself and about the program, especially the history of the program, just a little bit.
Okay. Well, I came to Rio in 2006. This particular program was started in 2005. It was pretty much the brainchild of faculty at Hopkins College, where they have a 2-year technical program in wildlife and fish. They were seeing that the opportunities for students with just a 2-year degree were very limited, particularly for full-time employment. So they came to Rio and inquired about developing a 4-year program. And at that time, it was essentially started out as a 2+2 program. Since that time, and originally all the classes were actually offered up on the Hopkins campus. It was pretty much a night program, which was worked out well for students who wanted to get this 4-year degree, and we had a lot of weekend labs with that. We have since transitioned the program down to the Rio campus, and that's provided some more opportunities, which, as we talk later on today, will expand a little bit and share some of those things. But it's been a great opportunity for me. I really appreciate it. I grew up in Ohio. I did my graduate work in Nebraska and Penn State, and lived in several Midwest states. Really relish the opportunity to come back here in this part of the state, because this is still kind of wild compared to where I grew up around the Columbus area.
And certainly, yeah, down the southeastern part of the state. Yeah.
Yes.
And our other guest is the other wildlife conservation faculty member, Dr. Rob Hopkins. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
You want to tell us just a little bit about yourself, what brought you to Rio?
Sure.
Things like that.
So I moved here in fall of 2009. That was my first semester. And I just finished up my PhD at Southern Illinois University, where I did zoology. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I have family in the area, and the opportunity was here. And like Don, we wanted to move our family back and raise them in sort of a rural, more solar-paced setting. And so this was the perfect place for that.
Great. Now, Dr. Althoff, we know that this program, based on what you told us, has been around for about 8 to 10 years now. Can you tell us a little bit about what the students do in the program? It's a wildlife conservation program, but there's probably more to it than just that. Can you talk a little bit about the program now?
Yeah, it's attractive. The very topic is very attractive to a lot of people because they tie it in with nature, think about being outdoors. And we, unlike some other of the disciplines, we do have the opportunity to get out and do hands-on things, and students generally gravitate to that a little bit more. We'll get in a little more detail about the curriculum in a bit, but in essence, we still have to do the book work. We still have to work very hard to get them familiar with the terminology, concepts, principles, and in that regard, so in our program right now, they really are into this by the time they're juniors and seniors. So we have a core set of courses that all the students take, and these courses primarily are in the program because the Wildlife Society, which is a professional organization, has said you need to have these elements to get the educational part of what we think a professional biologist ought to do. So that particular curriculum was designed partially with that in mind. The other part is to bring them up to speed and essentially get them in the 21st century here in terms of what wildlife conservation is about.
So they start off with some foundation coursework in general, like biology, zoology, things along those lines?
Absolutely, yeah. Biology 1, Biology 2, for those who are from the older day, that would have been botany and zoology. Okay.
Then an ecology course.
They're going to have an ecology course, and they're going to get some math because they're going to have a statistics course. All the things that are typical for a liberal arts education in terms of the gen ed side. Mm-hmm. And you don't abandon these fundamental things that you get on the biology side. Actually keep building on them as you go.
Right.
If you come from the Hocking program, you probably took a fundamental course in identification of birds and mammals and fish. In the Rio program, we're just adding those. If you want to start here, instead of starting at Hocking, you can start here as a freshman. And those courses tend to have a bit more reliance on memorization. And sometimes that's easy for students, sometimes it's not easy, but we do transition quite a bit. By the time they get in their junior, senior level courses, it's more than memorization. We actually are very much trying to get them to put the pieces together, develop critical thinking skills, and also really promote this idea is that you get into fish and wildlife, you're probably going to be managing people as much as you're managing the wildlife resource. So it'd be nice to be camped out someplace and never have to see anybody, but in fact you are generally working with the public, you're working with other folks that are interested in this, so developing those other skills is important.
That's part of the job. Yep. And you mentioned that there's been some curriculum revisions and getting students moved into and acquainted with some of the more recent developments. And Dr. Hopkins, I know that you're teaching a relatively new course. Is it a GIS? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the idea of revising the curriculum, I think that's one of the distinguishing marks of the program. And since I've been on board in 2009, we are continually thinking about what is in our courses and how that compares with what is typically required of our graduates when they're out there and they're in the job field and they're trying to work out as scientists and wildlife managers. And so I'll provide maybe 3 examples. One, when I first came on board, one of the first things we did an expansion of the limnology course to create, which is the study of lakes and rivers.
Okay.
And we essentially expanded the lab component of that to enable I guess we expanded both the lecture and lab component of it to enable the students to get more exposure to the underlying theory, but also more exposure to the lab and field applications.
Okay.
And we had a human genetics course, which was in there, and we decided that it was more relevant for our students as we looked at the job market and the opportunities for master's level studies and even PhD levels, that having a conservation genetics course that was focused on wildlife genetics was much more reasonable. And then the third thing that we did, we used to have a course in evolution, and it turns out that we scanned the job announcement and the requirement that there was this new thing happening in GIS, which stands for Geographic Information Systems, which students having the skills in mapping and modeling was much more important, much more marketable than them having skills in those other subjects. And so we essentially replaced out the evolution course with the GIS course, and that is probably, at least of the courses that I teach, one of the most valuable courses that they get in terms of being able to offer a future employer a very distinguished skill set, so to speak.
So in that GIS course, if I understand it correctly, they're mapping not only the topography of the land, but also the animals that are on the land?
Yeah, sure. So some of the projects that we do in that course, they model the spread of invasive species. They model and they analyze the habitat selection, and they do some things where they crunch some numbers and try to figure out, so where are the areas we should conserve and manage, and where are the areas that we shouldn't. So it all has a real problem-solving slant.
Okay. Very interesting. And I'm sure the students appreciate getting that skill set because it sounds like that's going to make them more marketable. And of course, while we were preparing for this, we did discuss briefly that even though a student might have a very strong interest in being outside, you still have to put bread on the table and make sure that you can feed the family. And so there are skill sets that they need beyond just enjoying being outdoors and working with animals and things like that.
Right. And to add here to what Rob is saying about how this is an important skill to pick up, you think back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just a few people knew how to do word processing. Now we assume everybody has to do it. Maybe you don't like to write and type, but if you can't do that, if you can't handle basic email. So
Sure.
You may not become an expert in GIS, but if you understand what you can get from it, it's really going to help somebody when it comes time to either with possibly a seasonal position, but ideally a full-time position. And they may get totally into GIS, but there's going to be more of this overlap where you're going to have a certain set of skills, and that's one of the possibilities.
Right, and I think in contrast to the sort of historical market is employers are increasingly looking for students with a suite of skill sets, rather than saying, well, I need a map down, I'll send it down to the GIS guy, or I need these stats down, I'll send it down to the stats guy. They're looking for a more well-rounded scientist, and so we design the program with that in mind. We're always scanning those job announcements, those job requirements, what are they going to be doing, and modifying our courses to meet what we're seeing out there.
That's terrific. That's exactly what needs to happen, and I appreciate the fact that you're not only doing that, but that we have the opportunity now to let people know about what's going on in the program. One of the things that you alluded to earlier in one of your comments was that the students get because of our size, because of our location, they get a little bit more of a hands-on opportunity. Can you talk a little bit, and I know you've got some video and some still shots for us, of some of the things that the students are doing?
Right. One of the challenges you have with the wildlife thing is wildlife doesn't always happen at 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But we try to do our best. Some of the things that we are doing either in labs or additional activities, we're getting students out into the fields, we're getting them in the streams, into the ponds. Sometimes we're doing old-fashioned type collecting, it's simply nets. Other cases, as illustrated here on this video, we're using a backpack electroshocker or electrofisher, and in this scenario basically the fish are stunned for a moment and they're netted. We're going to put them into a bucket and ID them. We may be interested in numbers. Most cases we're interested in just the diversity that is there, this kind of thing.
And I would add that the students are usually quite surprised on how much diversity can be found in a little small stream like that.
Right. In this particular scenario, what they're out there doing is basically collecting bugs with what's a process called sweep netting. This, again, it's amazing the diversity you pick up on this. People think you're just getting butterflies, when in fact a whole bunch of other bugs. We're putting them in a bag and collecting as many samples as possible there. Then we go back into the lab and actually analyze these, try to again identify them. And wildlife is not, in the traditional sense, it was all pretty much game and fish species. We're expanding on that. As you see here, we've got a little bit of video on a butterfly, but we have quite a few people that are recognizing and have interest in insects, in plants, and certainly all these things are part of the wildlife resource that's out there.
Right.
Now, are you tagging? I see a tag on that particular bird.
Right. We didn't actually tag this one, but this is something that they can learn about a little bit later. I'll be talking, I think, about the Kestrel project. But banding birds is a really important aspect of monitoring and even just the handling, which, again, I think we'll get into this a little bit more later on this afternoon. But the fact is that giving them hands-on experience, exposure, and at the same time, Rob and I are both interested in collecting data that we think has value for building databases. So some different opportunities that come up that really aren't, I think, in a lot of traditional programs, even wildlife programs, where we're trying to get that hands-on, continue to push the hands-on opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And as part of that, I understand that you actually began a Rio echo monitoring program. Can you talk just a little bit about that, what's involved in it, how it got started?
Well, it goes back to my roots kind of when I was at Ohio State. We had a whole quarter when there was the quarter system, 15 credit hour course. We spent 3 months out in at a field station.
Wow.
And that had a huge impact on me. It happened in the spring. You see all the things that happen in spring. You're going out every day, literally seeing what's going on, very little time in the textbooks. So every place I've been, and finally when I'm at Rio, I'm like, okay, I would like to have a field station. I wish we could have a resident program where we actually do that with students. Well, that's fairly expensive. It'd be nice to have a couple 100 acres to do that. And so in checking around, nobody basically was in a position to provide that land. So started to skin the cat a little different way and decided to put the word out. How about us just allowing access to your property to allow us to do sampling? Maybe it will be with flying squirrels. Maybe we're going to look at the plant communities you have there and such. So this Rio Echo Monitoring project has really mushroomed. because we're up to 23 sites. Some of these are a couple associated with Hocking College, some of them with the High Valley Conservation Coalition, a local nonprofit organization. We have a couple of local landowners. Bob Evans Farms has allowed us access to theirs. And so between close proximity and the variety of things that we have, it's just opened up a vast new opportunity to do more hands-on and actually do some long-term monitoring of what's going on, which of course our students are turning over every 2 to 4 years, but we're building some databases and go back into the classroom and Rob can share with you, it's oftentimes you can make up databases, but it's more fun, it's actually more meaningful. You say, hey, this has been collected for a while, this is what we're going on, you got a chance to contribute to it. And so that's just some of the Rio Eco Monitoring Project, and fits in nicely generally with what we're trying to do with our curriculum.
And hopefully some of those data in the database could be shared with others, and maybe the students can get a little bit of experience at a higher level, because that may lead them to do some more work at a higher level using the data that we've helped to generate.
Right. And one thing too is that wildlife science is changing in the sense that there's more and more data that are out there that have been collected for the past decade. So a lot of their students, as they're going out into the job field, they're actually finding themselves having to go back and work through historical data to reconstruct pictures of what the landscape used to look like and what it looked like now and how that's affected the wildlife population. So those skill sets really carry over quite nicely, because that may be a very significant emerging trend.
Now, I also understand that you've got some video of one of the projects that you've been working on, and you'll have to remind me again the name of the sparrow. It's the kestrel?
Oh no, it's actually a small falcon.
Oh, okay.
It's a raptor, and this would be the kestrel project. This actually we got started almost 20 years ago. I was on the faculty at Hocking, and one of the other faculty was very interested. His name's Henry Barrows, and when we first started doing this project, we only put the boxes up on billboards, but we put them on the poles of billboards. Now, what some of you are seeing on the video here, or just showing there just a moment ago, raptors are important animals because they do kind of give us a barometer of what's going on with their environment. Understanding how they play roles also, or there's issues perhaps in airports. This gentleman here is holding up a bird that actually is captured on the OSU airport. Our class went up there, has gone up there several times to actually see the things they do to actually reduce the amount of wildlife that's there. And this is an aspect we expose our students to in a human and wildlife conflicts class that normally the public wouldn't be aware of, unless perhaps you remember just a few years ago there was a miracle on the Hudson.
Right.
And so you learn the principles of wildlife management, how to, quote, do things to have more wildlife. In this case, you're trying to figure out ways to have less wildlife. So there's some of that kind of exposure. Here's an example. They're learning about pyrotechnics, which is one way to discourage wildlife from being at a using a particular area, because airports in some cases attract some species, sometimes in large numbers, and anything that could be in the way would be an issue. We're back here to our kestrel project, right? We expanded this a couple years ago, and even here on Highway 35, we have some of these boxes on the back. I know you're not used to driving down the highway and looking on the other side of the road, but you'll perhaps see some of these boxes and wonder what's going on there. Well, these are where kestrels, a small hawk, will nest. We take these boxes down off the poles, off the back if we have them, and we ban the chicks. And again, we've been doing this, I think we're into our 19th year will be this spring. So this is a fairly long-term project, and we've seen some changes. Again, hands-on opportunities here.
So that is a picture of a kestrel.
Yeah, up-close picture of a kestrel that's a subadult. We're banding these birds. We can not only age them at this point, obviously, but we can determine the sex. So again, great hands-on opportunities for the students to, and this is generally what they get excited about anyway. This is why they come into the program. They see this kind of thing, and we want to provide those opportunities because you do need to have those skills.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us just a little bit about what is going on with this?
Okay, well,
Looks like an outdoor shower, but I
yeah.
don't think it is.
Dr. Hopkins mentioned about the fact that you have to learn new skills and new things come along, and GIS, certainly that technology, that computer-oriented stuff is a big part of now natural resources management. The techie world is still also expanded in other ways. This happens to be a bat acoustic monitoring unit. Actually, you could use it for birds, but we're able to detect. The previous slide was with it deployed in the field, and you have 2 microphones there, and we're recording at sometimes depending on how we program it, we are recording the both at the ultrasonic level and then what you and I can hear. And bats are echolocating at that, and most bat species during their foraging have very species-specific signatures in their calls, their echolocations. So we're learning more about bats, doing some of that work. We also, again, going back to human-wildlife conflict situation, we've exposed students to surveying bats in buildings. We have a resident in Hamden who has had a significant infestation of bats over the years, and so we're slowly trying to exclude them because they're not in there in the wintertime. And we've done these exit surveys at night where we position our students just around the edge of the house, and we actually count bats coming out. This happens to be one residence where 4 years ago counted over 1,200 bats exiting. With the efforts to basically try to exclude them, we're down this most recent survey this last September, we were down to 25 bats. So some of these older homes, a little bit of a challenge. But again, hands-on opportunities, get to see the real world, and a part of wildlife that normally, again, the public's not as aware of when they hear the word wildlife. These are these are other species and other issues. So it's not always about hunting and fishing. Right. Certainly, that's a big aspect of it. But
and we've had some students that have went into full-time employment with the wildlife control aspect. Is that correct?
Yeah, several students are working with USDA's APHIS. Wildlife services, again, the airport kind of thing. We have one student who's now a full-time expert as far as doing going through the bat acoustic monitoring. We didn't have that in our program when we started, and he wasn't exposed to it, but he's developed that hands-on skill, and he's one of several we've had come back in the last few years and say, hey, I was at Rio, this is what I did, this is what I do now, and so we got some confirmation that these things are helpful to have in your
Good. Have you had students come back and actually suggest things that you might want to consider for future studies or future areas to go into?
Well, an increasing number of students have come back and say, well, because it was only within the past 2 or 3 years we've had the GIS course, and so there were students who have went through the program before that have emailed and said, you know what, I'm out in the field now, I'm working, and I really wish that I would have had that course. And they suggest that, well, maybe you guys should consider adding that. Well, it turns out that we did add that now, and so the students who are coming through that program are getting that experience. The Tech Com course.
Right. The communication course where we're really focusing on oral and writing skills that are specific to the natural resources, and both putting together technical papers, going to scientific conferences, and perhaps doing presentations or presenting posters. And sometimes it's geared a little bit to what you do in the general public, but the most part to bump up the level that you need for scientific conferences. And I might add one other thing is, we talked about a curriculum changing. These various activities that we have done over the time have changed quite a bit too. And we have one of our, at the time he was a student, now he's a graduated student, started a Facebook page, which we have quite a few of our former graduates as well as our current graduates looking at that. And we get a lot of feedback when we're posting pictures of various activities. We go, wow, you're doing that now. Yeah. And that's great. And if you want to do this, get in contact with us. So it's been a nice bunch of feedback. And like Rob said, we always wish we could do things better. So students that are in the program now are definitely benefiting from.
And I think one of the things the students are doing now that we do more of is the directed studies and the independent research project. Like I have a student now who will be presenting in April at the Ohio Academy of Science conference, doing some study on the on the establishment and then the spread of python in Central Florida. So we work with wildlife, but not just wildlife here in southeastern Ohio, but we're using a pretty vast database, about 20 years of collection records from the Florida Museum of Natural History, and so that's a really nice project.
So is this student actually going to be traveling down to Florida to do some of the research? Or is he
No,
just
all of
using
the work
data?
is being done here. It's
Okay.
mostly computer oriented. These are records that experts have collected over the last 20 years. He will, however, be going up and presenting at the conference.
So it could be that some of the data that you're developing for our database will be used by experts from other areas of the country.
Right.
Just like our students are.
Right. It's one of the kind of the cornerstones of science is to get that information, make it available to others. And I'm a big believer in generating long-term data sets. It's interesting in Southeast Ohio, there's not a whole lot of things that essentially have been recorded and documented. So even basic inventories are valuable things, and students get a chance to contribute to that.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but I wanted you to talk just briefly about community involvement. I know that you mentioned the Rio Echo monitoring, and there's a spot. Can you talk a little bit more about, just very briefly, about some of the ways that the community could get involved?
Well, anytime we can add specimens to our collection is great. There are state and federal regulations, but sometimes if you come across a specimen that you shouldn't really pick up because it's a protected species or whatever, if it looks like it's in fairly good condition, we might well be able to use that. We'd also continue to like to expand as much as possible locally here. Other places that we can go to. Perhaps it's just once a year, maybe it's twice a year. Maybe you have a stream, you have a pond, you have a large woodlot. It would provide us opportunities to again, expand on opportunities for students to do research, for Dr. Hopkins and myself to do research, and also to enhance our labs. It's just good possibilities can come out of having these local communities. More exposure, different settings is really good.
Great. And there's just one more thing that I want to mention. We have wildlife grads from Rio Grande going all over the country, as you can see in this map, both for grad school and employment opportunities. So the impact that students are getting here, they're taking all over the country.
Absolutely, and they're working both with state and federal agencies. Some are working in a consultant capacity. Many of them are working for non-governmental organizations, a lot with metro parks, so quite a bit of variety.
That's terrific. It has been a pleasure to have both of you come on and talk about the wildlife program here at Rio Grande. I wish you good success and your students good success as they continue on with their studies and on into the rest of their lives. And I want to thank you for all joining us this afternoon, and we invite you back when we have another Voice of Rio. Thanks for watching us.